Right, and with that, I'm going to welcome to the stage Victoria Edwards. She is a librarian who knows the power of silence. Hi, it's morning, so I'm going to start with engagement. Raise your hand if you always listen to something during your commute. Yeah, we're not crazy, right? Raise your hand if you listen to something while you're walking or going for a hike. Put your headphones in. How about while you're working? Okay, I think we're still in majority there. How many of you would say that you work in a noisy environment? A few of you. How many of you would say that you live in a noisy community? Okay, not too many there, but my name is Victoria, and I'm a public librarian. My job is often associated with silence, so I think about noise and silence more than most Americans probably do. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it today. So I wanted to start by defining silence. Silence is the absence of sound or noise in the textbook definition of it. You'll also hear some definitions where silence is seen as the absence of something which should be present. We'll get into that a little bit more later on. But it's important to note that quiet is relative, silence is absolute. So these are kind of different terms, actually. And working in libraries, people often associate libraries with silence. We're actually aiming for quiet more often than not. So that's important to note. There's this stereotype of librarians as these sort of like rule enforcing, shushing people. You'll see it on media all the time, but we're aiming for quiet, especially in public libraries. Reasonable noise is permitted. We have a whole youth area. You're not expecting the kids to just be quiet all the time. This means that some of our spaces are a little bit too noisy for people who are expecting total silence, and we get complaints about that regularly. So I do hear that. Our library has a couple of one-star reviews that accuse our staff members of making more noise at public service desk than anybody else in the library, which I'm sure at times they do. It's necessary, but I get it. I think that we all could use a little bit more silence in our lives. But how many of you would say that you're uncomfortable with silence? You sit in that silence for a minute, see if more hands go up. No. I think there's this word datophobia, that is the fear of silence. And this is a rising fear of silence, right? I think it's because the world is getting noisier. Silence becomes all the more notable and uncomfortable as a result of that, because it's that absence of noise. So we have this idea, I think in some other associations, we think of silence as being alone. That's an uncomfortable thing. Especially for those of us who also associate silence with overthinking. Some of us don't want to be alone with our own thoughts. That's uncomfortable. So there's this negative association there too. There's some consequences of sedatophobia. People who experience this might experience insomnia, especially when they're trying to sleep in a quiet environment. Also, when you're trying to sleep in a noisy environment, that can be difficult too. So it's a sort of a paradox. Reduced productivity, especially when you're trying to work in a quiet environment. This is something that people with sedatophobia experience. Also, anxiety during social silences. We all talk about those awkward silences. That's something that can be experienced. And then there's this itch to fill the void. I know when I was a reporter, like many journalists, I found that the juiciest quotes often followed a long silence. So people tend to fold or give away a little bit more than they'd initially intended if you just let them sit with their thoughts for a little bit. Sometimes they'll also collect their thoughts and give you something that's really well thought out, a better answer to the question that you posed than what they'd originally responded with, but it is sometimes used as more of an interrogation tactic. So be on the lookout for that if you're ever in an HR interview or something and there's a moment of silence. Don't feel like you have to give more away than you would have otherwise. But there's that itch to fill the void, right? So considering these common fears, what are some of the benefits of silence? Well, let's talk about noise first. Chronic noise exposure leads to, of course, hearing loss, also heart disease. Interrupted sleep can cause a whole bunch of other issues. Disrupted sleep is an issue with noise. And then poor academic and work performance as well by chronic noise exposure. The World Health Organization says that adverse health effects start to result when noise traffic exceeds 53 decibels or air traffic exceeds 45 decibels. Nearly a third of the US population lives in an area exposed to noise of at least 45 decibels, according to the Department of Transportation. There are disparities in noise that deepen inequalities in our communities as well. Neighborhoods with almost no Black residents averaged about 42 decibels a night when people looked at it, and neighborhoods with 3/4 of Black residents averaged 46 decibels a night. That's 4 decibels more. And then those disparities are likely actually worse because wealthier households and schools are more likely to have triple pane windows and more insulation. So when you're looking at the socioeconomic level of these communities, the experience noise may be different, even more different than what the numbers show us, depending on the buildings that they're in and everything as well. So as much as we might be uncomfortable with silence, noise at the current levels in many communities can be harmful, and we're on this upward trajectory. Noise is increasing, not decreasing, and it's at a pretty rapid rate. I have a theory. So I think that in the Western world, we see noise often as inherently good because we associate it with productivity. It's the sign of hustle and bustle. If there's a lot of traffic happening, it's just because a lot of people are going to work, coming home from work, going to parties, I don't know, whatever people do. The inverse also holds. I think we have this association between silence and idleness or inaction, which leads us to a negative connotation. I don't think that necessarily has to be the association. And I'll talk a little bit more about the inaction aspects later. But we have attempted some solutions to noise pollution. In 1972, we passed the Noise Control Act that put the EPA in charge of monitoring, studying, and mandating policies related to noise pollution. Sounds great. Naturally, it was defunded by, any guesses? By Reagan. It didn't last very long. And so Europe is doing a lot better than us right now at controlling noise. They've mandated quiet breaks on trains. They've mandated noise labels on outdoor power equipment, noise reduction in car manufacturing, and noise mitigation efforts at airports. Seems like pretty basic things. Some cities have gone even further than that. In Paris, they've installed cameras that measure the sound level of vehicles, and they find drivers that exceed those sound levels. And I think everyone in the Metro Detroit area is like breathing a collective sigh of like, oh, envy. Switzerland has national quiet hours. They have these overnight, but also 1 hour during weekdays and all day on Sundays. Beyond these policies, I think, though, that we need to sort of reframe our Western understanding of silence a bit. That's kind of one of my goals with this talk today. I want to look at 4 or 5 positive powers of silence, and I'll talk about some of the potential harms of those powers as well and abuses of them. So the first power of silence as a tool for good potentially here. Silence can mean safety. So silence is not always, in a social environment, it's not always a sign of boredom, of judgment, disinterest, or conflict. These are some of the associations we have when we're experiencing silence with another person. But it's not always based in a failure to communicate. Silence can create space for listening. We pay a lot of attention to how what we say can help or hurt our loved ones, but we don't often think about the ramifications of silence. And we might learn something important, for example, if we check in to see what our silence might mean for a partner. I know my comfortable silence sometimes to Austin feels like I'm ignoring him or shutting him out. He's a talker, so that's something you always got to touch base with your partners on. But our internal thoughts and anxieties become louder when we experience silence, so it's important that we go into it with the right frame of mind. They found in recent studies that silence can build intimacy. A recent study found that intrinsic silences that feel comfortable to both partners are associated with high ratings of relationship fulfillment and low arousal that was previously thought to be achieved only in solitude. So there's some benefits to silence as safety in our relationships. Silence is also healing. Sound therapy is the use of sound, vibrations, or frequencies to deepen mindfulness experiences and support healing. Of course, we have to be wary of like good vibrations, sort of healing therapy and pseudoscience here, but there's not much evidence to things like frequencies healing you and curing you magical ailments. But it can help us manage our mental health, which can help our body's natural healing efforts. Silence is an underappreciated tool, I think, in this music therapy toolbox as a result of that. I know there's a couple people in graphic design, and I think of silence a lot like the way that negative space is used in graphic design. So negative space on this slide is all of that like white, basically. So everything that's not text or a picture or a graphic, and it draws your attention to the things that are text or pictures or graphics. And that's really important. You can appreciate what's there more by what's not there. Thank you, Brett. Silence is also, there's silent retreats that offer like a reset on noise. Have you guys heard of these? They're, I looked into the cost because I was like, let's see how much of a ripoff these are. They're actually pretty cheap. A lot of them. There are a number of them that are based in spiritual practices, and so they're free. They're like, come be one with us. But there's also some that are just like around $100 a night, kind of like the cost of room. They'll do meals together or meals apart. Some of them are like just a couple times a year. Others are rolling. You can just go any time of the year that you want to visit. So something to look into if you're interested in a vacation that really steps you out of noise for a minute. Silence is also a chance to get in tune with our bodies. So a little aside here, if you follow me. The quietest place in the world is currently an anechoic chamber at Orfield Labs. Journalists describe hearing their own heartbeat, the crunching of bones when they move, the sound of their eyelids shutting. It's negative 24.9 decibels in the latest readings that got them the Guinness World Record for this. The composer John Cage, he's fairly controversial for his work 4:33, which is 4 minutes 33 seconds of silence, also experienced that there is no absolute silence when he was in an anechoic chamber at Harvard in the 60s. He said, "I heard two sounds, one high and one low. When I described them to the engineer in charge, he informed me that the high one was my nervous system in operation and the low one was my blood in circulation. Until I die, there will be sounds, and they will continue following my death. One not need fear about the future of music." The lab's founder, Stephen Orfield, said simply that in the anechoic chamber, you become the sound. So there is no such thing as absolute silence in the way that we personally can experience it, because there will always be sound in our bodies happening. And that's kind of a way to get in tune with our bodies, depending on how deep into silence you might go, or into attempting to reach it. Orfield Labs is open for public visits, so if this is something that you wanted to experience and it's intriguing to you, that's potentially another trip you can go on. I'm just here for all your vacation advice today. Silence is also peace. It can be associated with peace. We talk about peace and quiet. So there's this association already, just as silence is the absence of sound, peace is the absence of conflict. We also talk about silent as a grave. There's this somberness there. We see death as an absence of all senses, therefore silent. But it doesn't have to be this horrifying, uncomfortable, morbid thing. There's a peacefulness in it too. There is a kinship, and it humbles us. It's something that we will all share. So in that we can find a unity. Silence is often a part of our experience in places of remembrance as well. It's a show of respect to those in mourning, and it's an empathizing with those who have passed away. We expect silence in the memorial, which of course is in the middle of New York City. And it's not silent, but they have worked in white noise essentially through the sound of all this water moving through. And in that, you can have this effect of not being able to hear the traffic that's happening around you and all the hustle and bustle of city life, and have that experience as much as possible of remembering silence as a grave, silence as peace. So we create also moments of silence as a practice of remembrance. And of holding somebody else and empathizing with somebody else in our minds. Lastly, silence is sacred. I wanted to talk a little bit about the way that silence works in a lot of different religions, because it varies by religious practice. So for Quakers, silence is often a communal experience. They have silent worship. It is a practice of empathy and solidarity. Quaker William Penn wrote that true silence is the rest of the mind, and is to the spirit what sleep is to the body, nourishment and refreshment. So there's that silence is healing coming up there again as well. Silence is important in many monastic practices, including especially for Benedictine monks. The great silence is what they call the observance of silence after the final prayer of the day until breakfast the next morning. For these monks, their silence sharpens their listening skills and intentionality, and this is how they see it. They practice speaking only when necessary and from a place of calm, clarity, and love, not from ego, anxiety, or impulse. It also, of course, protects their communities against sins like gossip and helps their community avoid unnecessary conflicts. So there's a reason for it to be in their communities as well. The Buddhists view thoughts as these sort of turbulent waters and see silence as a tool for helping to still those waters and allow one to perceive more clearly. They have this idea of ignoble silence, which is sort of that silence as complicity, while noble silence moves towards right speech on this path to enlightenment. So there's a time to be silent and time to speak. The opening lines of the Tao Te Ching, when you're looking at Taoism, say that the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Silence in Taoism is not a void, it's the space where the Tao reveals itself through presence. And Hinduism sees Mona, just sort of roughly translated as silence, as this profound spiritual practice and state, far beyond mere quietness that represents inner peace and the foundation of wisdom that's achieved through mental stillness and through controlling speech, which leads to self-realization and liberation from worldly compulsions. Has anyone been to Bali? No. I guess they have a holiday known as Nepi, and it's called the Day of Silence. This is where the whole island shuts down, even for tourism pretty much. I mean, you can walk around your resorts, but you're asked to respect them and respect their practice of total quiet that day. It is followed by their Saka New Year. So this is sort of a reset before their traditional New Year practices. So I think it's timely for us as well. But I also wanted to talk about some of the potential harms of silence and this relationship between silence, power, and harm. So just like all different forms of power, silence can be used to protect or to harm people. It can be used for control. I mentioned briefly it can be used as sort of an intimidation tactic or an interrogation tactic. It can be used, the silent treatment, we use this as punishment. I used this against my mom all the time when I was a kid, to varying levels of efficacy. We also talk about, have you heard of the term white torture? I had to look into this one. Silence is used as a psychological torture. So in white torture, they have a prisoner in a room that is all white. They're fed only like rice. Their light is put in a way so that you can't see shadows. Guards come in wearing all white and muffling their noise. And basically silence is used as a form of torture in these white torture chambers. There's also silence as erasure. So silence is a means of removing power. Of course, we talk about the inverse of this as breaking silence on a subject. And this is a little bit more that silence as being the absence of something that should be present, in a sense too. Silence removes agency and visibility in this sense. Power is taken, not chosen, during silence as erasure. And sometimes as in deplatforming, this is sort of an extension of the justified will of the people. Other times it is an extension of censoring state powers. And then silence can also be silence as complicity. This is passivity in the face of harm that's being done. This is choosing comfort over confrontation. And in this application of it, it is willful negligence. It's not that somebody doesn't know, it's that they're aware and they're choosing to remain silent on the subject. Silence here harms because it protects an already harmful status quo. And I had to update this presentation a little bit after some of the events of the last week, but this slide really should have been here. Silence can be participating in social justice. Justice demands that requires that we demand accountability. So it requires speech, but also active silence. It requires us to pause to observe and listen to those voices in the front lines. Also to lift up marginalized voices rather than drowning them out. If everyone were to jump to speak right away, then we lose some of the more important voices that need to be centered in the conversation. Especially given the fact that the voices that are often most heard are voices of power, and those voices would do well in lifting up other voices that should be more centered in these conversations. It also allows for grief, solidarity, and collective mourning. This is a really important step, especially when some of the things that, like what's happened over the last week have happened. There's families in mourning, and any collective mourning, it should be out to support them, to show sharing of grief and solidarity with anyone who's been harmed here. It is important to follow this responsible silence with action, to avoid that silence as complacency, and to take the steps that after listening you know to be right. So I think that silence, or at least quiet, because we can't get true silence, is worth working into our routines. I would like to practice some silence with you today in a guided meditation. What time is it, Cindy?
11:27.
All right, not too bad. we're gonna practice for, would you be able to stand 3 minutes? Yeah. Okay, let's do 3 minutes of silence. Let's get into the right frame of mind first. So shake out your limbs, adjust so that you're seated upright and comfortably. You had to have known I was going to do this. If you choose to close your eyes, I want you to picture like a quiet, solitary environment. I did originally start thinking of this conversation for January because I see winter as a sort of quiet season. You don't have animals moving around as much. 2 inches of powder snow can absorb up to 60% of sound. So if you wanted to, you can picture that winter scene or any of the other sort of environments that we've talked about. I want you to breathe, acknowledge any sounds that come by, and let them pass unperturbed. This silence is not uncomfortable. It is safe. You are listening. It is healing. You're in tune with your body. It is peaceful. You are humbled. It is solidarity with those who are voiceless or whose voices were taken away. It is a space as necessary as noise. Thank you. My alarm makes noise apparently. So, new phone.
You missed my surprise.
Sorry.
Just
So,
I saw.
how many of you would say that you felt a different perception of silence during that experience of it? Maybe. Okay. That was my goal today, so I appreciate you at least humoring me and saying that you did. Silence is never empty. It holds possibilities. It's powerful. And like all powerful tools, we have to remember to use it with care and intentionality. So, questions? Complaints? Yeah, Becca.
You were thinking about when you go in that chamber, how you can still hear those two sounds, the
Yeah.
circulation and the other one. Do you know if someone is completely deaf, if they're still able to?
I'm not sure about that. My alarm makes noise. I guess I hit snooze.
I've got a question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have an answer to that. I do know that, like, I know a little bit more about blindness, and I know that people think about blindness as in total darkness, but that's not the experience of blindness. It's often, you can see some forms of light, some shapes, and so I've heard different peoples of deafness vary by person as well, and I imagine by sort of the reasoning behind it. And so I don't have the best answer to that question right now, but what I would say is I imagine the experience varies. JD, did you have a response to that too, or a different question?
Sort of related.
Okay, yeah.
You said it was the decibels were negative?
Yes, it said negative 24.9 decibels for this anechoic chamber. And I'm not entirely, I know decibels work on, yeah, go ahead, take your shot.
It's a log scale.
Yeah, log real quick, right?
When you have, so just like the Richter scale for earthquakes, every 10 decibels is 10 times the sound. So when you get to 0 and you go negative 10, that's 1/10 the sound. Negative 20 would be 1/100th the sound. So that's why you have a negative number.
What's 0?
You're going to a fraction of what it was before.
What level is 0?
Don't get to 0. John,
Yeah.
here.
What level is 0?
I don't know like what sound pressure it is, but it's an arbitrary level because it's a log scale.
Yeah, I was wondering if like they started at 0 and then at one point they realized actually they need to be lower
Right.
than that.
Yeah. It's key to the total sound energy, and just as a real quick thing, this decibel, you can get a decibel meter on your phone. It's a real common app, and I was recently recording an audiobook, and I found it really interesting to suddenly check. Oh, what are we at right here? What are we at right here? In this room, I tried it at a rock concert, I tried it at home, and I knew I needed to get to a certain level to record and stuff like that. And you can pull it up and check anytime. It's pretty neat.
I will say too that anechoic chambers are like the original intention, I think, was to remove echo, and so that's a different sort of type of goal there. A lot of the scales say that 0 is like the sound of like the lowest sound that we can perceive, but clearly in anechoic chambers it goes deeper than that, and because of that echo, I believe. If I'm looking at just kind of a scale here, normal voice, room volume voice is around 60 decibels, it's saying. Whisper is around 40 decibels, I think. It's going to vary by person too. Some people are louder than others. But. All right, Connor?
When will the moment of wonder be?
That'll be after this. I think after this. So we'll have any more Q&As? Yeah, go ahead.
It's just interesting thinking about the power of silence, because I use it all the time in work. I train people. I get in front of a classroom and train people, and we talk about the power of silence. We're letting silence do the heavy lifting, when sometimes people are either absorbing what they're hearing, or they are maybe checked out or disengaged. I mean, you have to be aware of all of those types of things, and this really gives voice to sometimes that power that is there.
Yeah.
You have to be careful with what you use that power for.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. But remind me what field you work in?
I work in corrections, but I'm.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
I train people
Yeah.
in a classroom.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, Marty?
Have you ever been in one of those salt tanks? I see them advertised every once in a while.
The sensory deprivation.
Yeah,
talking
that's
about floating
like, it
tanks.
kind of makes me think that it would be a little, like, it's dark, I know
Very
that.
Stranger Things, very on theme right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been in one of those myself. I've had it on my to-do list for a while, but baby, so haven't gotten around to that. But has anybody else experienced that?
I wanted you to explain what it is. A soft, what did you say, a soft?
It's like a pod full of salt water, and the salt water is very buoyant, and it's, I think, body temperature, so you don't feel anything around you, and you float in it, and there's a light lid that closes on it, probably in a dark room, so it's very dark, and it's body temperature, and I would imagine that it's very quiet in there too, would be part of the experience.
I mean, if you floated around in the water and,
Because they
yeah.
have called sensory deprivation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
depending on, it's supposed, the goal is to not to float and feel weightless. You don't exactly feel nothing because you can kind of feel the tickle where the surface of the water is on your skin. And then it's supposed to be completely dark and completely silent. Although usually they have like an option for you to have a soft light or a soft music playing if you prefer that.
And you did that?
Yeah.
What did you go silent? What could you hear inside there? Just like the beating of your heart?
Yeah, what you really want to do is get some of those kind of like mushy earplugs that can like shape to your ears, because otherwise the salt water kind of works its way into your ears. And so you can really hear, like, what I heard was that like my heartbeat from the sounds from inside my own body.
Wow.
Did you like it?
I did like it.
Silly question.
Any other questions? Thank you, Brett.
Can I just share something?
Yeah.
I live alone, so I live with a lot of silence all the time, and I'm fine with that. But I had a somewhat negative experience yesterday. I went to the African American Museum, and I loved the museum, and I loved our educator. But they have, I guess I'll call it a display where they have people talking. And it's really loud. And I'm trying to look at the exhibits on the wall and read about them. And this blaring exhibit, 50 feet away, I couldn't even concentrate. It was, I just felt really cheated out of the experience, because somebody thought at that museum that let's make it be real loud. I think it's great to have it, but just have it be turned down. And I mean, I'm not gonna call the museum and complain, I'm not in charge of it. But if they put me in charge of it, I don't qualify, so. I really loved the museum, and actually, we just kind of touted a bit, it's the largest African museum in the world. The Smithsonian has a larger museum floor space wise, but not artifact wise. It's really a fabulous experience to go there. But I don't know how, I would like to go back and see things that I couldn't see, but this blaring stuff in the background, I don't know how to make it.
Deb, maybe try earplugs next time. You're talking about deafness, and sometimes things are different, because I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking, what if I went in there, because I've got a little bit of deafness?
Right.
I don't know,
Well, I
but
could turn my hearing aids off, but the problem
There you
is,
go.
no,
That's-
the problem is, John, I don't even have to wear them.
oh,
They're
okay.
just
So
better
loud,
with-
right? Because I've only got one ear left, I'm real paranoid with that one ear, and I literally carry an earplug in my pocket all the time. And in a case like that, in it goes. So.
Well, that's a good idea, and I appreciate that, because there's so much that I do get a chance to see and experience, with a lot of walking and time spent with the educator doing that. That I do, I feel cheated, and I want to go back, but I'm thinking, like, to what? No silence. But I can bring my own, at least diminish it, so that then I can enjoy it more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll say for the library's part, we just started carrying noise-canceling headphones for those people that are
Oh, yeah.
interested in experiencing silence at our library, so I have a better thing to do than say, like, tough luck, kitty. But,
Yeah, I carry my loop earplugs everywhere.
Yes,
for
yeah.
settings for the noise level.
Yeah, I know Loop is good with that, too.
I have them for concerts.
Yep, yeah.
We'll have to have you show them to me later.
Yeah, afterward I'll show them to you. Okay, they're okay.
I want to make sure we get through a couple more. So, Lance?
Yeah, I really like that statement you said at the beginning, quiet and relative silence is. I have tinnitus in one of my ears, so like always having sound, so I always have to have sound to block the sound.
Great.
Right? So I'm wondering your thoughts too on like the opposite of silence. Like when I'm in nature, you said life is loud, death is quiet. I'm walking on concrete, there's no sound. But if I'm in the woods and there's birds and there's cicadas and there's screaming and there's sex and there's death and anger and craziness always going on, it's almost overpowering, but in like a nice way, I guess. I was just wondering if you could, how much you thought about that when you were putting kind of this presentation together.
Yeah, I mean, I think we lean into it a little too hard, maybe, in our culture today. I think, of course, nature is great to hear, and there's all sorts of research on the benefits of hearing nature noises too, in our daily lives. I think that, and especially for if you're hearing ringing sensations all the time, that's one of the applications of sound healing as well too. That's actually not pseudoscience. But there are, I think this, when we make so much noise that you can't even hear the sounds of nature, that we're just making our own sort of new nature up in our concrete jungles. I think that's when we get into some maybe reframing that we have to do in order to make that not a normal experience, and to kind of take ourselves out and go, hold on a minute, this isn't actually something I should be putting up with as regularly as I am. Connor?
Oh, yeah. So a call back to the sound deprivation tank thing. I feel like the perfect deprivation tank thing would be if it was like in space, and every time the person travels away from the center of the box with air in it, the thing would move to recenter the person. So you could like literally, yeah, I think that would be very...
I knew you were going to take it to space at some point. But I think it's appropriate to talk about silence and space and that relationship as well. I know when I was talking about the anechoic chambers, Orfield Labs NASA had their astronauts visit there before going on trips in order to get this sort of anechoic feel for silence as much as possible. But also NASA is also concerned at the same time about all of the noise on the International Space Station, because it is quite a loud environment with all of the machines happening there. I guess actually they have to use some sound dampening tools in order to make it less noisy. So we're already putting our noise pollution out there in space, for better or for worse, but it is a vacuum, so you know. All right, I think we should probably wrap up there, move on. Thank you all for humoring me. If you're interested in diving deeper, I did not read any of these books. But they came up a few times in other things that I had read. John Cage wrote this book on silence. That's the composer I mentioned. There's an academic text called The Power of Silence. And then, of course, a more spiritual text on silence. The Power of Quiet and in a World of Noise. So.
Can you leave that book